I'm going to welcome back our speaker, Dr. Michelle Lofwall, who has to have her video off due to some internet issues. But here is Dr. Lofwall.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for coming. We are going to have a lot of fun and hopefully talk more. So hopefully some of you will come off mute or talk into the chat. We just want to review some cases, kind of the key things to think about when working with clients and thinking about whether or not you're in a boundary violation situation. And we're going to start with just reviewing our key terms like justice, autonomy, dual relationships, gossip, and why these terms can be helpful in working through boundary issues. And then talk about some examples and try and set some healthy boundaries with clients. I think these are also just like good skills in real life too. And I found them helpful to review, and I've actually reviewed them with friends and colleagues. Because sometimes I think when conflict starts happening, it's because of we're missing some of these kind of things. So boundaries, just remember, these are like those imaginary lines that help promote a physically and emotionally safe and professional, kind of just very healthy relationship. You can see it as pro-treatment, pro-recovery between you and your client, if you're a navigator or a peer support specialist. Simple boundaries, maintaining your scheduled work hours, staying in the role that you're in. Dual relationships, that's when you are in a relationship that is more than just you as your job working with the client. It's like where you maybe know the client from a different maybe job or a different relationship, or it's more than just that work client relationship. These can be perceived or actual, and they can sometimes lead to a conflict of interest and a potential boundary violation. So an example would be if you're working with a client who is married to a family friend. Excuse me. Ethics, these are like the moral principles that guide your organization's behavior. They also are what guide the clinical research principles when we're working with human beings. These are do no harm, autonomy, where you're letting people choose, justice, and beneficence, which means that you're providing benefits. Gossip, remember, that's just talking or emailing or somehow communicating about other people or agencies, usually about details that you just don't know if they're true or not. So we don't want to do that. Health literacy, this is where we want to spread knowledge and truth and science, and so that way people are well informed and can make informed health decisions about what they want for themselves. And so you're doing a lot of health literacy training, and those are those educational tools that we've developed and that you all have helped us make better. The OEND brochure, the MOUD flyer. Let's go to our next slide. Okay, so just remember these four basic principles of ethics. I think these are just kind of good principles in general. Autonomy, always wanting to allow an individual to try and make his or her own choice, right? Letting them control their fate. The client decides after you go through all the different treatment options with them on the MOUD flyer that they'd like to link to methadone, respecting that and trying to connect them to a methadone treatment provider using your community resource guide. Beneficence is the principle of acting with the person's best interest, trying to make sure they're getting some benefit, something positive coming out from their decision. And justice is the concept that emphasizes fairness and equality among individuals, that everyone would have equal access regardless of race, ethnicity, gender. Non-malfeasance, this is, when doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, it means above all do no harm. And I think just as human beings too, we try our best not to harm others. We can go to our next slide. I want to get to these cases. Substance use disorder specific boundary consideration. So just knowing that working with people who have a substance use disorder, that sometimes they've had, they have very little or no social support. So they may really be looking at you as not only a mentor and someone who's going to help improve their health literacy, but you may be one of the very few people that they know that has their best interest at heart and wants to help them connect to treatment or harm reduction services. They might not know others like that. So they may take a liking to you quite quickly. and they might not know how to interact. Like, it maybe have been a while before they've had, normal, healthy relationships. And so you're going to have to just be prepared to kind of teach that and role model that. The current friends and families that they have may be actively using as well, and not be safe spaces for them as they are choosing their own recovery journey. And so you might have to just remind people about healthy boundaries in a helpful way, not in a punitive way, but just trying to teach that. Trauma-informed decision making. So lots of people have experienced trauma, either in the past, present, both, and that has been part of their relationships, and that can impact how they have a model of relating to others like you. And so some patients or clients may be less likely to assert themselves, to ask questions. This is why, you're really taught all that motivational interviewing to help someone be comfortable asking you questions and helping to get them to talk and develop solutions for themselves with your guidance. But you just want to keep an eye out, looking for unhealthy behaviors, difficulties with healthy communication. They might, be afraid to tell you something like that they just really aren't being treating well at a place, and instead may tell you that they don't want to go back to that particular living facility because there's no heat in a broken bed. And so they're asking you for some other resources, but actually you end up kind of calling the place, figuring out what's going on, and you see actually that there's no problem with the maintenance. So something else is going on. So just appreciating that people may have difficulties with healthy communication. Workers may also need to communicate and set safe, healthy boundaries and, repeatedly over time. It's just practice. It really takes practice to change habits. And that includes having the ability to feel safe and you can tell someone what's really going on and develop a healthy relationship. These are just reminders of what you are, or who you are, I should say, and things that you do. And then our next slide, I think, just reminds us what you are not, right? You shouldn't be someone's sponsor, clinical therapist, priest, clergy, friend, be in the role of life coach as a clinician, or you shouldn't also be treating family members as in your role as a peer support or a navigator. And if those things do happen, then you want to, talk to your supervisor so that can be eliminated. We talked about how boundaries are hard, right? They're not black and white situations lots of times, that there is this zone of vulnerability. That's the gray zone, where you really need to think a little bit more carefully. And that's why it's always good to talk with someone else about it too, like your supervisor. Okay. So we saved some cases, and hopefully you might pipe in with some cases as well, or maybe discussion points that you want to point out, or I think ways that you've handled kind of cases like these. Okay. So John, are you doing this one?
So this is just from last time we looked at using the intimacy continuum. We talked about a behavior and then whether or not we thought it was always okay, sometimes okay, or never okay. And so what I thought we could do here is maybe have a discussion around some of the ones that weren't as clear, that kind of fell in this sometimes okay, and then maybe, discuss situations and get feedback.
Right. I think that sounds good.
Yeah. First one was using profanity. And so the discussion question is it ever okay to use profanity in the workplace? Does someone want to come off mute and maybe, and again, this is a discussion, we're all just having, trying to talk through some of these ideas. Does someone want to take a position that it's never okay or sometimes okay?
If you're working at a healthcare facility like UK, I think you're going to end up having the never. Now, does that mean people are going to tattle on you, or that that there's just you're absolutely going to get in a ton of trouble if you do it? No, but it really shouldn't. It should be sort of a very rare exception. And, I think people may expect you to apologize afterwards, because it might in the healthcare setting, it is not considered acceptable professional behavior. Now, I think we might get very different answers from a recovery community organization. So I would be interested to hear what our peer supports think, and also how our navigators with BCN handle this.
Looks like Kristen, you wanted to
I'll
come
say
off mute?
something.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Okay. So I'm a recovery coach for Wave 1. I think it's sometimes, but it depends. Like, I don't think you should ever drop like really strong profanity, like the F word or something like that. Maybe something like hell or damn might not be a big issue. When interacting with participants, sometimes using language that they use and speaking on their level makes them feel more comfortable. If we're over here talking about things like neural pathways or stuff like that, we're probably going to lose them. You know what I mean? So speaking on their level normally helps you, create a bond. But I don't think heavy things like the F word or something like that, maybe like the lesser ones. But that's my opinion.
Thanks for sharing. What do other people think?
Kristen, did you want to come off mute?
I'm gonna go with knowing your audience and knowing your surroundings is the best way to practice that. Kind of what both the Dr. Lofwall said and what Lathan said. If I'm in a business meeting with persons at UK or in an academic setting or in a healthcare setting, like a hospital, I'm going to be mindful of my words and make sure that they aren't inappropriate. However, I'm in a detention center and I'm going to meet people where they're at, kind of like what Layson was saying. And so if my participants are using foul language or saying bad words, and I just kind of correct them every time they say that or cringe or, back off of that, it's not going to go well for me. So I'm going to meet the person where they're at. And, it doesn't matter if I'm talking Ivy League or ghetto, you still know what I'm saying, So I think it's just being mindful of the audience and your environment. That's me personally.
Can I chime in?
Please.
I read the question is it ever okay for us to use profanity in the workplace? Because we can't control what our participants say. We really can't, but we can lead by example. Just because their cousin doesn't mean that we have to go to that level to do it too. It's all how we conduct ourselves, because we all represent voices of hope. Every placement that we're in, whether it be a syringe exchange, whether it be an OTP, whether it be a buprenorphine or whatever it is. So when I read that question, I look at it as, is it okay for me to use profanity in the workplace? For me, no, it's not. I understand we meet people at their level, but we can also do that without using profanity. Now we can't control what other people say or how they act, but that doesn't mean that that's how we have to talk to get through to them. Because once again, we do represent, because if that's the case, then why are we striving so hard to knock the stigma down on, instead of a needle or syringe, instead of clean, being in recovery? So I can meet my participants where they are without using profanity to get words across to them.
Thanks, Daniel.
This is Shirley. I want to say I too work in a detention center, and the way that I have dialogue with my participants is completely different than the way I would have if I'm having a meeting with the jailer here. I don't think we need, this is just my opinion, I don't try to act perfect in front of them. I try to be myself as much as possible. I'm not dropping F-bombs or nothing like that, but in a casual conversation that we're having, I agree with Kristen. I agree with Daniel somewhat too, like you just have to meet them where they're at and still maintain some form of professionalism as well as ethics, your morals, your values, things like that all come into play. I'm not going to sit and have a cuss out session, obviously, but you know, like Lathan said, sometimes we just got to meet them where they're at. And as Kristen said, if, you know, I cringe every time they say something or try to correct them, then I'm building more of a barrier than I am a relationship.
Thank you for that. I like how just all of you are just like thinking really carefully, right? Like about so many different things. And that's what, you know, we really want to do. I will say, you know, I also have started thinking about how do we kind of gauge people's emotions, right? And help them get to make their goals, like as you're doing recovery capital assessments or learning what it is that they want. And how do we help them move towards that? And and so I'll think too, just like a lot about language, right? And so I think overall I've tried to swear much less in casual conversation with friends and stuff, like even like, you know, outside of work, of course, never, but you know, I'm a human, right? So yes, I do swear outside of work. But I think as I've gotten older, I have tried to move towards building my vocabulary a little bit more, because I think sometimes people then get shocked by the swear word, or they get stuck on that, or it gets them too riled up, or they get still too riled up, and I'm stalling, right? I'm not getting them. I might be building a connection, but I'm wondering if that was really needed, kind of like what Daniel was saying, like, could I still make that connection, but try to use a different word that still connects with them, right? But gets them moving towards something else. Because I think that in general, sometimes if it's someone who's trying to better themselves with employment or moving up, right, that having a heavy vocabulary with lots of swear words is going to limit who is going to want to interact with them if sometimes. So I just been thinking about that too, right? Like, how do we get change? So, okay, well, we should probably move on. Is that okay if we move on? Everyone's nodding. Okay, cool. Thank you. Oh, giving a hug. John, tell us about this one.
Yeah, so this is just another question that kind of fell in that gray space on the intimacy continuum. So the question is it ever okay to give a hug in the workplace?
When it comes to a participant, I think no. I don't think there should be any kind of contact with a participant if possible. You don't want a participant to get mad and say that someone touched them wrongly when they hug them or something like that. So I think a participant, no. If you've built a relationship with a coworker, you've been working with them for like 2 years or whatever. I've seen coworkers do it. I don't have an issue with it. I'm not a touchy person, so I don't hug anybody, but I've seen coworkers that have worked, side by side for a year or two, and every once in a while they'll like give a hug or something. And I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it, but I don't do it.
I have seen a lot of folks like in the workplace, if you have like you said, if you've worked with them for a substantial amount of time, to be that hug Philly kind of person, and that's fine. But in my experience with participants, we don't know what kind of trauma that they have endured. We don't know what they've been through. And it's best to either, if you feel they're going through something and you're trying to console them, maybe to ask, because there are times that they need like a pad or something, but I always ask before I ever go and hug even a coworker, for that matter at all.
Tiffany?
I agree with a little bit of everything that's been said. Like I recently hugged a coworker because she got married. So I think that's okay. Now a participant, Again, you don't know the kind of trauma that a person's been through. If somebody comes to me and they're upset and they're crying, I'll say, do you mind if I give you a hug? Or do the typical, hand on the arm, like a pat on the back or something of that nature, because you could come off wrong to somebody. You could lead somebody on wrong. You could cause more trauma to somebody. You just never know.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, I have to agree with everybody, honestly. I give participants hugs. I give coworkers hugs, but never without permission. It's disrespectful, in my opinion, to invade someone's personal space without consent first. But some of us are huggers, some of us ain't. That's the whole point of asking, And it also builds not only like a verbal relationship, but more of a bond, a deeper bond, saying, hey, I truly love you for who you are, But that's just my opinion.
Thank you. I'm gonna get to you, Kristen, in just a second, but I did want to read some of the things in the chat. Crystal said consent is key. I think if you feel like someone needs a hug, you can ask them if they would like one. Jamie said, I hug some of them, especially if they just confided deep and personal information to me, or if they're emotional. Of course, that's if we have a good rapport and have known each other several months. And then Shirley just said no, because of the environment she's in. So thank you for those answers in the chat. And Kristen, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to be in agreement with everyone, really. Again, I think it falls back on the environment, the situation. Like the groups that I do here sometimes can get real emotional for some people, and even in individual sessions. And one of the guidelines I give in my group is we don't hug and touch and like if you're crying, get up and get your own tissue paper, even, because it's your feelings. I'm not going to take on your feelings. You feel your feelings. And that's what I try to share with my participants. Now, with that said, when I have participants who say, I'm so excited about this, or I have one who just lost her mother and she's not going to be able to, or her aunt, excuse me, and she's not going to be able to go to the funeral. And she was crying. She was very emotional. And I'm also on camera everywhere. And for me, that makes a big difference in how I feel about this question too. And she asked, can I get a hug or whatever? And she's crying. And so, yes. Yeah. And then I had a conversation with, someone who actually works here at the jail this morning. And it was very exciting with the conversation we were having. I was like, if we weren't in this environment, I would give you a hug, so exciting like that. So again, I just agree with what everyone else was saying, and I think it really just depends on the circumstances.
So I think all of your comments are, again, very thoughtful. I'm a psychiatrist, and so the number one things that psychiatrists get sued for is sexual indiscretions with their patients. And so it's never intended, and it's usually after years of having a relationship. But sadly, it happens. So our rules, like basically as psychiatrists, are you don't have any physical contact with your patients. And so I will say in healthcare, I see it. I see, someone gets diagnosed with cancer, it goes into remission, the whole oncology teams hugging each other and the patient, right? And so it's definitely not a hard and fast rule, but you just got to be really careful, because accusations can be said, and if it was seen, you are not going to have much protection against yourself if you are the person who is employed and it's a client who's saying that you hugged them and it was unwanted and you didn't ask, and no one, even if you did ask but you didn't have it written down, right? Like as a signed consent form, that would be weird. So just be really, really careful on this, because it's your job. It is your job. So, and you don't know how people are thinking about it. Even if at the time they say everything's fine, later, what if they get upset with you? What if they don't like, something else that they perceive that you've done? It can come back and be something that is used against you. So think really, really carefully about this one. I get it. Like I get the desire to connect and all that, but maybe like this one's just something you want to go back and like rethink and really talk some more out, because it can get a lot of people who have very well intended. And sometimes you just wonder, like, so was it just completely just misunderstood? And, like, just be careful.
Let's see here. This one had some kind of all over the place. Attending a recovery support meeting with the participant. Is it ever okay to attend a recovery support meeting with the participant? So we had some say it's always okay, some say sometimes, and some said never. So if anyone would like to come off mute and talk about this, feel free. Daniel?
I participate. I go to a lot of recovery meetings in our area. And I see a lot of participants there too. I don't think it's okay to take them to the meeting, but we do run into them situations where they are in that meeting with us. And I have never, and I probably never will just get up and walk out, because that's my safe zone as well. Sometimes I may tiptoe around about what I share, which I don't like doing that either. I try to be real and upfront with everything. But yeah, do I see people and do I see participants at meetings that I go to? Absolutely, on a daily basis. I do not interact with them as a recovery coach and participant. I don't talk to them one-on-one. I may talk to them in a group. I never bring up them as my participant or me as a recovery coach, by no means, because that's my time. That's my recovery meeting also that I go to.
So from the chat, it looks, Tiffany said, I think so, especially if it's been approved by supervisors. And then Herschel said it could help the client get comfortable with meetings, and somebody agreed with that. Does anybody else have other thoughts?
I'm on the fence about this one because to me, it's like a blurred boundary line for me, because you're not, they are your participant. Now, if they show up at a meeting that I'm already at, it's a little different, because that is like Daniel said, my safe zone. And if they are in my safe zone, I'm not particularly there to support them. I'm in there for myself as they are. But if I'm going and I'm representing, with them and for their support, that could be misconstrued to them as their special extra, you know what I mean? So I would kind of say no. I don't believe I would do it.
You guys are bringing up a lot of good points here.
I want to chime in on this one too. These are all really good ones, man. I think it's okay, especially those first few meetings, because it is scary going in, to a meeting, not knowing anyone, not knowing what to expect sometimes. So yeah, their first few meetings, okay, we can plan on meeting there or what have you. But like has already been shared, that's my safe zone. And sometimes, no offense, people, but I got to share about work related things, Now, never do I like share about specific clients or anything like that. But if it's threatening my serenity or my peace and I need to get it off my chest, well, that is my safe place, and I need experience, strength, and hope from other people who've gone through similar things in their jobs. And the only way that I get my spirit fed in that matter is whenever I open my mouth, so would I share as honestly in a meeting with a participant as I would if that participant was not there? I'm not going to share that kind of stuff. Again, I think it's a matter of just knowing and being aware of who's around you. And yeah.
So this one's a good one because I think it's especially unique perspectives, right? If they're your meetings, right, where you go and attend for yourself versus you kind of trying to bring someone to a meeting, introduce them to a meeting for the first time where it's not your meeting, right? Like you're just trying to get them comfortable, kind of almost like you're introducing them to a new a new resource, right? And get them. So you can see where you have the potential where there could be an additional boundary problem with like dual relationships then, right? Like, with it. So I think this one is a really complicated one. So, I think Tasha had some points in there too, excuse me, that can be helpful. So again, just kind of illustrates that whole intimacy continuum. All right, let's move on. So just the reminder about kind of the 4 steps, really trying to dive in and get to the details. And that's what all these questions were just meant to do, was really to dive in and see how you might be thinking differently depending upon the details, right? And then if you really get stuck and you're like, oh, I am in the gray zone and this isn't something like where I feel definitely good or definitely not about, that's where you want to start thinking, okay, so what's my ethical concern here? Is there someone that could be having harm, right? And then who is it? Is it me? Is it you, the client? Is it the organization you work for? Is it the general recovery community? Is it the study, right? Like, so, and the possible pros and cons then of how you would think through, like what the best decision would be, like to whether engage in the behavior that is at play, right? Like whether or not you're going to give the hug, you're going to take the person to the meeting, whether or not you're going to, I'm forgetting the first one, but, and then you're going to try and take decide one thing to do and take some action and document it when you're in the gray zone. Do you like the steps? Do you think the steps should be different? Okay, quiet sometimes worries me. Sometimes it means there's something wrong and someone doesn't want to be the first one to say something. Or sometimes it means that just everyone's okay with it.
I think the steps are appropriate. This is
Okay.
just my opinion, you know.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking in this area of boundaries. And Ashley's my supervisor, so she's amazing to go to kind of discuss things like this. So I think it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm. I like the steps. And the reason kind of why I like the steps is that sometimes when I would work with like residents or young doctors, they would get into a boundary situation and they'd freak out. Right. So like the emotions are like really high, like, oh no, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And like they make a decision or something and it's just, and they like don't realize about like the steps, right? Because some of these boundary things are so emotional, right? And then when you get too emotional, you don't think clearly. So I think like just knowing that, okay, I'm feeling this, I need to do my 4 square breathing, calm down, think rationally. There were steps. What were they? Okay, here they are. There can be an answer. I do not need to freak out. Right? Like, so I kind of like it for that. And I say it because I think it's something that's just practical in life, right? You can use them for your kids and, you know, your spouse, family, all as well as your clients. I think they're just good kind of framework for solving some hard situations. Other comments about it, the process? All right, now let's go to this one. Okay, so this is the case, another case example about social media boundaries, that you've been working with a client for the past month and you know them from the past. We're friends with them on Facebook prior to working with them.
I have actually,
What happens here? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have actually had this situation in a facility that I worked in, a treatment facility. And what I had done is went to the participant, the client at the time, and explained to them that it was nothing personal, that I had to separate the two and that I was going to remove them. I didn't do it without their knowledge because I didn't want any backlash or any emotion that really didn't need to be felt by them. So effective communication worked for me in this particular situation.
This has happened to me since I do work I serve Madison County, which is home for me. So quite a few of my not my clients, I was able to pass them off, where we partnered with BCN and Wave One. I was able to, give them off to the BCN instead of working directly with me. I was able to say, hey, I know this person really well, like we were friends in the past. I've been in the madness with them. It's a little close for me. So I was able to let the BCN work with them versus me actually taking them as a client. So it worked well. For the partnership was great between me and the BCN for that.
Let's move to our next slide. See what we have. So this is just the reminders of the steps to go through, thinking about the facts, trying to get just clear what's potentially opinions, rumors, thinking about who's vulnerable to harm with this social media example. If you do friend, if you don't friend, if you unfriend, is and quantifying the risk too, right? Because sometimes it could be really quite significant risk, or it could be more moderate or minimal risk. And then what do we see on the next slide, John? Right, so after you think about those things, you think about the ethical concern. Is there an ethical concern, right? That involves beneficence, doing harm, justice, autonomy. Thinking about how this plays into any of your handbook about general procedures. And then what, John? What's step 3? Oh, right. Remembering, discussing the possible solutions and the pros and cons to each solution. Trying to find a solution that causes the least amount of harm, always, and having some benefits and justice and autonomy as well. And then when they come really sticky, then always thinking about legal, if you need to get any legal advice too, if it's starting to involve regulations. And then you're going to think about your solution that you want to pursue, put it into action. Always nice to put it in writing. Document who's taking steps for what, and then think about follow-up, and sort of if things seem like they're not going in the way you had anticipated, then you can always, talk again with your supervisor, see if you have to change course. That's okay. So when we did a lot of the boundaries trainings in person, people had really good discussion and ideas, and talked about things like what your prior relationship was, what the risks were, benefits were of connecting or unconnecting, and thinking about safety risk also prior to interacting with any client on social media. Common tips that we heard from you all included setting your account to private, giving very limited viewing access, hiding your friends list. A lot of you felt like this was a good standard practice to avoid unwanted contact or an invasion of privacy. To some agencies were noted that they had work related Facebook accounts that, encouraged people to kind of, pipe in professionally on that Facebook account to reach out with limited ways to communicate. Other people noted that, they might just choose to set one boundary for all participants. Like, I'm not friends with any of my participants on Facebook, and that's just kind of shared right from the outset. This avoids any confusion that someone might be playing favorites. Okay, our other case we wanted to review is about exchanging of money or goods. A client you've been working with wants to show how appreciative they are and gives you cookies they made along with a thank you card.
Just recently, I had a participant bring me a card that she had made me. And she didn't purchase anything. Like, it wasn't a purchase card. It was one she had personally made herself. It was really sweet. I think things like that are okay. But to accept anything else, I think that's definitely crossing a boundary. And then I've also had a participant ask me to borrow $5 before. And, I have to be like, hey, no, that's where I'm going to set a boundary, because that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to coach you. I'm here to help you in your recovery and not loan you money and not, expect money back in return, none of that stuff. And just vocally put it out there like it's not okay. That's just my experience.
I too will not accept any gifts from participants ever. I mean, like she said, if it's a homemade card, that's fine, but allowing them to spend money on me is not okay in my eyes. So I just have a strict policy about that. Now my participants have drawn things in here and given me and things like that, and their art, and I have it hanging in my office, but anything of monetary value, I will not accept.
So I think this is all great discussion. I think sometimes the thank you cards are so so nice and kind of quite appropriate, right? Like if the message is clear and it's a really human interaction, right? Like a healthy way of interacting and expressing gratitude, right? Would be by sending a thank you card. So like, bravo, that you get a client that gives you the thank you card, I think. The food is harder, right? It's, the food is harder because you just don't know, maybe, who knows if you are allergic to something and you didn't know, they didn't know you were allergic to nuts in there or something. Like the food is just harder. But sometimes you get to decide, you have to think about it, right? Is this like a single cookie the person made, and that if you don't take it, they just are not going to get it? And so you take the cookie, you thank them, and do you just throw it away, but you don't eat it, right? Like, but and if they keep bringing you cookies, then you kind of say, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't love cookies. And you know what? I just really appreciate the thank you card. That's all I need. Your thanks. That is perfect, right? Like set the boundary. Because then they could think, oh, if I made them cookies and they loved them so much, and you said how much you loved them, then they then start thinking they have to continue to make you cookies. And so, yeah, so, okay, Tasha says that she told the client, thank you for the baked goods, but asked that they give it to the staff or other participants because of all their hard work and to show their appreciation to everyone, to be inclusive. Oh, that's great. That's great. So just realize that, you just can't know what exactly is in them. So, and there's always weird stories, y'all. Like I've heard of people getting cookies and no one realized they were laced with marijuana. And then everyone kind of just doesn't feel so great later in the day. So just think, but as a psychiatrist, I see a lot of different kinds of things happen. So, but great discussion. And I think that brings us right about John's putting up this slide for me. That's a hint. I'm supposed to, I think, now I think we're done with it.
Yeah, we just had 2 cases, and then
yeah, that's all good, because look, it's almost 12:30. But do you all have other cases or comments that you want to talk about?
Yeah, if anyone's had a gray zone interaction, or something that they weren't sure about, or something that they went to their supervisor about and had a good outcome, if you wanted to share that and get feedback, that would be great. This is the space to do that.
On the comment earlier about the social media, when I worked for the Hope Center, I had a couple friends and people I knew that came through, and I did not take them off of my Facebook. I remained friends with them, and in the long run, I didn't get harmed from it. Now I have grown a lot in these years, so now I try to protect myself a lot more than I did back in the day. So now I probably would take them off of my account, but I did have a past experience where I never did.
Thank you for sharing that.
I recently had a participant say, I didn't know that we were friends on Facebook. I don't know how we were friends on Facebook or through who or what, but we were. And she came in to the office and was like, yeah, I saw what you posted. That was real cool. And immediately I was like, oh, that's not cool, you know? So I had to have a talk with her and just let her know, like, you know, there are some boundary issues there. So I'm going to have to unfriend you, but I don't want you to take it personal. You know, like, I'm still here for you. I'm still your coach. And she was really open to it. I thought she was going to be upset about it, but she was really open to it and understood. And so I thought that was really cool.
The one thing that I noticed just from all these conversations, and I thought it was an interesting point, is just that consistency is important, especially when you're dealing with people, so that people don't feel like they're being slighted or you're playing favorites or something like that. But through all your answers, you've talked about consistent behaviors and consistent outcomes. And so that's just something that's happened with me in a previous positions. Just when you're not consistent, it can create issues because, you know, you're not even necessarily thinking about it, but other people can and will see that kind of consistency sometimes.
I think that's a really good point, John, especially for people that are maybe lonely and trying to make new friends and stuff and may not have that confidence yet in themselves. So when they're getting inconsistent messages, they don't always interpret it the right way as you intend. They might think there's something wrong with them or feel like they're less than. So not the direction where we want to go. So I think that those consistent messages are really important. Consistent, healthy messages. All right. Well, as usual, this has been so much fun to be with you all. And again, I've learned a lot. And I hope you have too, or you feel like you are like growing as well and enjoying your work and these sessions. So appreciate you all. Please, we welcome any feedback and don't forget to claim your credit. Have a good rest of your day.